What's next for the Microsoft-OpenAI relationship? Microsoft and OpenAI are in talks about the future of their partnership, they said in a joint statement Thursday, without providing details. Separately, OpenAI said it wants to go ahead with its previously announced plan to turn its for-profit business into a public benefit corporation, in which its nonprofit organization would own a $100 billion stake. OpenAI's decision to recast its for-profit arm as a public benefit corporation while keeping control in the hands of its nonprofit parent is without precedent at this scale, said Sanchit Gogia, chief analyst and CEO at Greyhound Research. It is a structure that fuses two competing logics: the relentless need to raise capital from models that cost billions to train, and the equally strong pressure from regulators, investors, and the public to demonstrate accountability. The proposed structure enables OpenAI to attract traditional investors who expect potential returns, while the nonprofit parent can ensure safety considerations aren't sacrificed for profit. However, Gogia warned the hybrid model is as much a gamble as it is an innovation, noting concerns about who carries liability if something goes wrong, whether fiduciary duty to investors will override social commitments when revenues are threatened. Monopoly is out and optionality is in, said Greyhound's Gogia, adding, Microsoft's shift away from exclusive dependence on OpenAI toward a diversified stable of models is not just an adjustment of supplier strategy, it is a redefinition of how AI will be consumed at enterprise scale. For Gogia, restructuring of the Microsoft-OpenAI deal is not an immediate service disruption, but a powerful reminder that vendor alliances can change overnight. Enterprises are learning that resilience is not about whether a model is fast or cheap today, but whether access is guaranteed tomorrow, regardless of how the vendor reshuffles its governance or partnerships. Both analysts emphasize that CIOs should focus on understanding the governance mechanics behind their AI vendors. Gogia advised CIOs to interrogate AI vendors less about marketing roadmaps and more about governance mechanics. Who holds veto power if corporate structures shift? How are SLAs enforced if model stewardship changes hands? He said. As quoted in computerworld.com, in an article authored by Gyana Swain published on September 12, 2025. Beyond the media quote, our view in full. Press for time? You can focus solely on the Greyhound flashpoints that follow. Each one distills the full analysis into a sharp, executive-ready takeaway, combining our official standpoint, validated through pulse data from ongoing CXO trackers, and grounded in field notes from real-world advisory engagements. Can OpenAI's hybrid structure become a template? Greyhound flashpoint. OpenAI's decision to recast its for-profit arm as a public benefit corporation while keeping control in the hands of its nonprofit parent is without precedent at this scale. It is a structure that fuses two competing logics: the relentless need to raise capital from models that cost billions to train, and the equally strong pressure from regulators, investors, and the public to demonstrate accountability. Per Greyhound CIO Pulse 2025, 58% of global CIOs now say governance and accountability matter more to them than the price of tokens or throughput of models. This makes OpenAI's experiment a litmus test. Noble intent on paper must still be matched by enforceable rights for customers in practice. Greyhound standpoint. According to Greyhound Research, the hybrid model is as much a gamble as it is an innovation. In its most generous reading, it could provide the AI industry with a third path, neither beholden entirely to Wall Street nor constrained by the ideological purity of open-source communities. Yet boards and CIOs know that structural elegance does not guarantee stability. In our policy pulse tracking, 58% of regulators in the US and EU already describe such hybrids as structurally unstable. The risks are obvious. Who carries liability if something goes wrong? Whether fiduciary duty to investors will override social commitments when revenues are threatened, and whether the nonprofit's oversight is substantive or merely ceremonial. Without independent audits and enforceable continuity provisions, enterprises should treat this model less as a template and more as a live experiment that may or may not withstand the first major crisis. Greyhound Pulse. Greyhound CIO Pulse 2025 shows that 62% of CIOs applaud providers who try to anchor themselves to ethical commitments. Yet 41% openly admit they cannot tell whether those commitments mean anything tangible for uptime, resilience, or compliance. More strikingly, 52% now rank vendor governance transparency above model accuracy as a procurement concern. This is a reversal of priorities that underscores the mood of the market. Enterprises are no longer dazzled solely by capability. They want predictable remedies and clarity on who answers when things go wrong. Unless new structures deliver that clarity, They risk adding more fog than light to the procurement process. Greyhound Field Note. Per a recent Greyhound Field Note, CIOs are being advised to treat novel governance structures with both interest and skepticism. In a hypothetical financial services deployment, for instance, legal teams might stall contract approval until it is clear who bears responsibility if a compliance breach emerges: the nonprofit overseer, the PBC operator, or some undefined blend of both. In another scenario, a manufacturing CIO might find enthusiasm for a mission-driven provider waning when the board realizes there is no precedent for enforcing continuity clauses across such hybrid entities. These hypotheticals illustrate a broader advisory principle. Admire the ambition of new structures, but assume they will be tested under stress and design procurement safeguards accordingly. How will Microsoft's multi-vendor AI strategy impact procurement? Greyhound Flashpoint. Microsoft's shift away from exclusive dependence on OpenAI towards a diversified stable of models, Anthropic today, potentially others tomorrow, is not just an adjustment of supplier strategy. It is a redefinition of how AI will be consumed at enterprise scale. Per Greyhound CIO Pulse 2025, 71% of CIOs already rank vendor diversification as their top AI priority, up sharply from 46% a year ago. Monopoly is out. Optionality is in. This is not a retreat from OpenAI, but an embrace of the market reality that resilience requires choice. Greyhound Standpoint. According to Greyhound Research, Microsoft has made a deliberate pivot from being an equity-heavy patron of OpenAI to positioning itself as the orchestrator of an AI ecosystem. By loosening its ownership stake but securing long-term access, Microsoft gains the best of both worlds: continued primacy in integrating leading models into Azure and Office, without inheriting the turbulence of OpenAI's evolving governance. The decision to license Anthropic's Claude is equally revealing. It is both a hedge against over-reliance and a signal to customers that their demands for variety are being heard. We expect other hyperscalers to follow this script, evolving into marketplaces where models compete side by side, rather than proprietary fiefdoms that demand loyalty. Greyhound Pulse. Our CIO Pulse 2025 data finds that 54% of CIOs are now embedding model switch clauses into contracts, a figure that has climbed almost 20 points in a single year. Healthcare and finance are leading the way, precisely because regulators in these sectors insist on redundancy and traceability. Just as telling, half of Azure's OpenAI customers surveyed said they were already evaluating alternatives like Anthropic or Cohere, not because GPT was failing them, but because they doubted the predictability of access terms. Nearly half of global CIOs now tell us they expect hyperscalers to act as orchestrators, not gatekeepers. Microsoft's recent moves speak directly to that sentiment. Greyhound Field Note. Per a recent Greyhound Field Note, CIOs are increasingly advised to demand multi-model integration from the outset rather than treating it as a contingency. Imagine an Asia-Pacific telco embarking on generative AI customer services. Rather than rely on one vendor, the CIO may stipulate that two distinct models must be built into production to guarantee resilience. This complicates testing and raises short-term costs, but in the event of an outage or deprecation, the enterprise avoids paralysis. Such advisory scenarios highlight the shift in mindset. Optionality is not indulgence, it is the new insurance policy. What should CIOs ask about risk and continuity? Greyhound Flashpoint. The Microsoft OpenAI restructuring is not an immediate service disruption, but a powerful reminder that vendor alliances can change overnight. Per Greyhound CIO Pulse 2025, 67% of CIOs now require explicit continuity clauses in AI contracts, up from 29% in 2023. Enterprises are learning that resilience is not about whether a model is fast or cheap today, but whether access is guaranteed tomorrow regardless of how the vendor reshuffles its governance or partnerships. Greyhound Standpoint. According to Greyhound Research, CIOs should interrogate AI vendors less about marketing roadmaps and more about governance mechanics. Who holds veto power if corporate structures shift? How are SLAs enforced if model stewardship changes hands? What happens if a key partner is absorbed, regulated, or rendered unavailable? The real opportunity in this moment is to negotiate stronger continuity provisions, escrow, multi-model failovers, advanced deprecation notices, while vendors are sensitive to scrutiny. The risk, of course, is that enterprises who neglect these questions may discover too late that contractual gaps expose them to precisely the instability they feared. Greyhound Pulse. Our CIO Pulse 2025 confirms a striking change. 52% of CIOs now rank vendor governance transparency above model accuracy as a risk factor in procurement. Cross-border firms in healthcare and financial services are especially cautious, noting that governance disputes could slow regulatory certification or create compliance blind spots. Policy Pulse echoes this. 58% of policymakers surveyed describe hybrid governance structures as fragile without independent oversight. The convergence of enterprise and regulator skepticism is unmistakable. Continuity cannot be assumed. It must be written into the contract. Greyhound Field Note. Per a recent Greyhound Field Note, CIOs are advised to plan as though vendor governance disruption is not an outlier, but a certainty at some stage. In a hypothetical healthcare deployment, boards might require all mission-critical AI workloads to be backed by a documented failover plan within 48 hours. In manufacturing, procurement teams might stipulate escrow-backed guarantees for continuity in the event of supplier restructuring. These scenarios serve as cautionary tales. Waiting for disruption to occur is no longer viable. Resilience must be architected from the start. Analyst in focus, Sanchit Gogia. Sanchit Gogia, or SVG as he is popularly known, is a globally recognized technology analyst, innovation strategist, digital consultant, and board advisor. SVG is the chief analyst, founder and CEO of Greyhound Research, a global, award-winning technology research, advisory, consulting, and education firm. Greyhound Research works closely with global organizations, their CXOs, and the board of directors on technology and digital transformation decisions. SVG is also the founder and CEO of the House of Greyhound, an eclectic venture focusing on interdisciplinary innovation. Copyright policy. All content contained on the Greyhound Research website is protected by copyright law and may not be reproduced, distributed, transmitted, displayed, published, or broadcast without the prior written permission of Greyhound Research or, in the case of third-party materials, the prior written consent of the copyright owner of that content. You may not alter, delete, obscure, or conceal any trademark, copyright, or other notice appearing in any Greyhound Research content. We request our readers not to copy Greyhound Research content and not republish or redistribute them, in whole or partially, via emails or republishing them in any media, including websites, newsletters, or intranets. We understand that you may want to share this content with others, so we've added tools under each content piece that allow you to share the content. If you have any questions, please get in touch with our community relations team at connect@thoffer.com.